Good evening. Have you ever noticed the older you get, the longer it takes to prepare for something? Sorry about that. All cameras take one shot, and then you have to go to the back of the room, because I'm used to a classroom, nice and quiet. Take one photo. Thank you very much for coming tonight. We're just beginning to see the emergence of a new economic system onto the world stage. The sharing economy on the collaborative commons. This is the first new economic system to emerge since the advent of capitalism and socialism in the early 19th century. So it's a remarkable historical event. This sharing economy on the collaborative commons is beginning to flourish alongside the exchange economy on the capitalist market. Often they cooperate, sometimes they compete. The capitalist system is not going to disappear. It's going to be transformed. And those companies, old and new, that flourish, will increasingly find value in aggregating some of these great commons that allows the rest of us to have a sharing economy. But I think my sense is that by 2050, 36 years from now, the capitalist system will no longer be the primary arbiter of economic life. It will be a powerful partner with an ascending sharing economy on a collaborative commons. We are beginning to see a hybrid economy, two systems. The triggering agent that's responsible for this great economic transformation is an arcane business term called zero marginal cost. Now, marginal cost, or the cost of producing an additional unit of a good or service after our fixed costs have been paid. What we are beginning to see is a paradox deeply embedded in the heart of capitalist theory and practice, previously undisclosed, from Marx to Keynes. And this paradox, interesting enough, has been what's responsible for the great success of the invisible hand of the market. And now, the invisible hand of the market is about to have its ultimate triumph. The irony is that triumph is leading to the birth of a new economic system that will partially replace the system that created it. Let me explain. I teach at the Wharton School. It's the oldest business school in the world, and I actually was there as a student back in the 1960s, to give you an idea how ancient I am. And I teach business leaders in our executive ed program and for a long, long time. We teach in capitalist theory and practice that every entrepreneur has to be constantly vigilant in search of new technologies that can increase their productivity, reduce their marginal costs, so they can put out cheaper products and services, win over consumers, and bring some nice profits back to their investors. In fact, in classical, neoclassical economic theory, the optimum market is where you sell at marginal cost. The cost of simply redistributing each unit. It's simply that none of us ever expected, in our wildest imagination, a technology revolution so extreme in its productivity that it could reduce marginal costs for some, not all, some goods and services, making them potentially free, abundant, and no longer bound to the scarcity of the exchange economy in the market. Let me back up for a moment for context on what's unfolding here. Every great economic paradigm in history, I believe, has three features that come together in a seamless realm to change the way we organize economic life. And our economists have missed it all through theory and practice. There has not been too many paradigm shifts in history. We had early agriculture and pastoralism, the great hydraulic civilizations on centralized irrigation agriculture, the predatory empires, feudal society, the late medieval market economy, and industrial capitalism. And what is so interesting about each of these economic paradigms is they bring three technology revolutions together at one period of time to form a general purpose technology platform, a prothesis, if you will, that extends society over broader territory and annihilates time and space. Every paradigm for economics and history has combined a new form of communication to more efficiently manage economic activity, new forms of energy to more efficiently power economic activity, new forms of transport and logistics to move economic activity. And when they come together, it changes history. Let me give you an example. 19th century, first industrial revolution, convergence of communication, energy, transport. We went from manual printing to the steam-powered print press. That was a big leap forward because we could mass produce volumes of material very cheaply and lower the marginal cost. Then we introduced the telegraph. And this communication technology then merged with cheap coal and the steam engine, new form of power, and locomotives on national rail systems, a new form of transport. This allowed us to go from local markets to national markets, create the giant vertically integrated stockholding corporations of the 19th and 20th century, reduce marginal costs because of the economies of scale, allow a lot of people to have work and to consume. And it is true that a lot of the revenue went on top, to the top, as Mr. Thomas Piketty has pointed out. But in fairness, a lot of the great benefit of vertically integrated economy of scale went outwards. All of us are a lot better off inside the capitalist system than our ancestors were 300 years ago. There? The 20th century, second industrial revolution, communication, energy, transport come together again in a general purpose technology platform. Centralized electricity, especially the telephone, later radio and television, became the communication media to manage and market cheap oil, the internal combustion engine, and a new transport system, national road systems. The second industrial revolution of the 20th century is now clearly sunsetting. It's dying. It's on life support. Let me share an anecdote. When Chancellor Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come to Berlin in the first few weeks of her new government to help her address the question of how to grow the German economy and create jobs during her watch. When I came to Berlin, the very first question I asked the new chancellor is, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy, or for that matter, the world economy, in the last stages of a great energy era? And an era in which the communication technologies are old, the transport and logistics technologies have exhausted their S-curve, and fossil fuels and nuclear power get more expensive and the price is volatile on world markets. We can talk from now to doomsday about austerity and all sorts of reforms, which are good, but if we're still living in a 20th century general purpose technology platform of centralized communication technologies, centralized fossil fuel energies, and old-fashioned transport logistics on dumb road systems, our GDP will continue to slow, unemployment among the young will continue to rise, and we'll see a continued stalling of the world economy. We're right out now on the cusp, right now, of a third industrial revolution. A new convergence of communication, energy, and transport. The communication internet, which we're all very comfortable with, it's really been in our lives since the World Wide Web, 1990, 24 years. That communication internet is now morphing into a super internet. An Internet of Things, all in the last 2 years. Although I know you and your institute's been dealing with it for years, it's now prime time. And so what's happening is the communication internet is coming together with a renewable energy internet and a GPS-guided, analytic-driven, smart logistics internet to create one internet, 3 in 1. Communication internet, energy internet, transport logistics internet. And these 3 internets and the super Internet of Things are sending sensors across the economy. Billions of sensors are being attached to our agricultural fields to monitor how the crops are growing. Sensors on dumb roads to make them smart. We can check the traffic. Sensors in warehouses and distribution center. What's happening with the freight at UPS and Federal Express. Sensors in the industrial factory floor on real-time economic activity. Sensors in retail shops on how much is being purchased in real time and what. And smart homes. Many of you are connecting your appliances with smart sensors and with data so you can use them when you know the price of electricity is not too high on the grid. This is all just beginning. Now, what this means for the human race, we got about 13 billion sensors now. We're going to have 100 trillion sensors likely by 2030. We are outing the central nervous system of the human race for the first time in history and creating a prothesis, an externalized, digitalized nervous system and brain that can in real time connect the human race and potentially begin to knock down all those old boundaries, borders that have kept us from each other. We can begin to organize economic life as a single human family in one biosphere, even though we will be able to do it distributed so that we have self-sufficiency in each region of the planet. That's the exciting part. Then, of course, the next moment, the terrifying part. 100 trillion sensors? What about data security? What about personal privacy? How do we deal with cyber terrorism? And what do we do about companies that want to monopolize this entire structure for their own ends? I'm not naive about this. My global team of companies, we're out in the regions and the countries actually laying down this infrastructure, and this is really a struggle. The telecom companies, the cable companies, the power and utility companies, and the Googles, Facebooks, and Twitters all have interest here. Now, let's assume for just now, because we're going to get into this when we have our discussion, for the sake of argument, we maintain net neutrality. That is, as we have now in the communication internet, everybody's treated like everybody else. No one's discriminated against. Assume network neutrality and we can deal with data security, privacy, and cyber terrorism. This will allow anyone in this room, anyone on the planet, to connect up to the super internet of things. And by the way, 40% of the planet's now connected. The other 60% are coming in the next 10 years, because guess what? The Chinese now have a smartphone for $25 with massive computing power. So if you're making $2 a day, your family can get that smartphone in 20 days, and then they're now in the game. So if we have net neutrality, it means that billions of people around the planet will be able to go into the super internet of things, and they will have a transparent picture of all the economic activity. No secrecy, no caveat emptor, totally open and transparent. We're just going to know what everybody else knows, including the big vertically integrated companies of the 20th century. And that means that any of us with our smartphone, our computer, can mine that big data coming through the system to the three internets, communication, energy, and transport, and we can use analytics just like Google. Those apps, and we can create apps that are already being created for smart homes, etc., and we'll be able to increase our thermodynamic efficiencies, our aggregate energy efficiencies, dramatically increase our productivity, and billions of us will be able to become prosumers and begin to produce and share many of the things that we put out to others, either on a marketplace or a sharing economy on the collaborative commons at near zero marginal cost and for free. This isn't academic. This is already happening. We have seen the zero marginal cost phenomenon impact entire industries. Some of the most powerful vertically integrated industries in the world have been devastated in 14 years here. It started with Napster, 1999. This little file sharing service comes along, and all of a sudden, I guess apparently high school kids had nothing else to do after school but connect with each other and figure out in interesting ways with the software to defy the recording companies and laterally share and even produce and share their own music, and bye-bye recording companies. And then hundreds of millions of young people began to produce and share their own videos on YouTube, all copyleft, all open source, no proprietary information, and they bypassed the movie and TV industry. Then hundreds of millions of young people began to create their own news blogs and their own social media, connecting in lateral networks, near zero marginal cost, and sharing all of this information for free. Then the human race began to collect the wisdom of the ages and the knowledge of the earth on Wikipedia, 6th largest website, all free, non-profit, and millions of people checking each other for accuracy. Totally counterintuitive. Let me say at this moment, I grew up on Adam Smith. And Adam Smith said, human nature is this: each individual only cares about their own self-interest. And every entrepreneur couldn't care less about the public interest, only their self-interest. And he said that's good, because in only caring about their self-interest, they create new innovations as entrepreneurs that help society. Well, apparently a whole generation didn't read Adam Smith, because we have hundreds of millions of young people now who are using their creative talents, and they're all social entrepreneurs. Every one of them at one time or another has produced a video or a photo album or a news blog or some piece of knowledge, and their creativity is being shared open source, no proprietary control over it, because they're more interested in their social reputation than their credit rating, and they're more interested in their social capital than their finance capital. They still have to make a living. We'll deal with that later, before the end of the evening. How do you make a living? There was an assumption here. Sure, the zero marginal cost has taken down the recording industry. Newspapers and magazines have gone out of business. The average millennial in my country watches 20 minutes of broadcast TV a week. Book publishing has suffered from free ebooks. And now massive open online courses in the last 24 months, shattering the universities, 6 million students, every country but North Korea, the one country that does need them. And they're on these courses. These courses don't cost very little to produce, $10,000, $20,000. And then putting out one versus putting out 1 billion of these courses is the same cost. We've got 6 million kids free taking these courses, best professors in the world. They're getting college credits, and it's throwing the universities into disarray, just like the recording industry, newspapers, magazines, book publishing, television, film. But we assumed there'd be a firewall, right? A firewall. And that this zero marginal cost phenomenon would not cross the firewall from the virtual world of bits over to the physical world of atoms. The super Internet of Things breaches the firewall because it brings the communication Internet together with renewable energy to move economic activity, automated CPS-guided, analytic-driven transport and logistics to move economic activity. Let me give you 2 examples. Renewable energy, 3D printing. We now have millions of people around the world that are producing their own green electricity, solar and wind, at near zero marginal cost. And the epicenter for this third industrial revolution is right here in Germany. Denmark too, but Germany's the economic engine of the world, and it's the 3rd largest economy. Not bad for 80 million people. And it's all happening here. And now in the last 12 months, which we'll talk about, it's now happening in China, though not being reported in the West. Europe, Germany, China, Asia. Maybe we can get them together across Eurasia. So here in Germany, we have millions of people producing their own green electricity. 1 million buildings have been converted to micro power plants producing solar and wind. The fixed costs are not cheap for a solar panel and wind turbine, but those costs are plummeting. They're on an exponential curve, just like computer chips. When I was a young man, computers cost millions of dollars. There are only a few of them. We did not anticipate Intel's computer chip and Moore's Law, which allowed us to double the capacity, half the cost of computer chips, and now there's a $25 smartphone. Solar and wind have been on a similar exponential curve for over 20 years, and it's never reported. A solar watt of electricity, if any of you are in the field, one little solar watt in the 1970s cost $66 to produce. Tonight, it's 66 cents. You see the curve. And our global team has run the numbers, and so is Ray Kurzweil. Ray was at MIT, head of the lab. He's now head of all of Google development. His team's a little more optimistic. He says, look, we double this every 2 years, 8 more doublings, 16 years, we're totally into this near zero marginal cost world. I think it's going to be about 24 to 30 because of the installation challenges. But once you pay back the fixed cost here in Germany, the marginal costs are near zero for this energy. This is the story the big energy companies in fossil fuel and nuclear don't want anyone to know. The sun shining on your roof is free. It isn't going to send you a bill. The wind flowing across your property is free. There'll never be a bill. The geothermal heat under the property is free. There's no bill. 27% of the electricity in Germany is now green, 35% by 2020. You're leading the world into this, but watch China in the next 4 years. And guess who's producing this power? The big 4 power companies are out of it. Vettel, EMBW, I used to work with Utz Clausen when he was there, RWE and E.ON. Great, wonderful power companies. The vast majority of this electricity, think file sharing and music, news blogs, it's being produced by millions of Germans and others. They came together in cooperatives, which are micro-commons. Sharing economy in the commons, a cooperative is a micro-commons. And they came together in urban and rural areas across Germany. They get loans from the bank. The loans are low interest because they see you're going to pay it back with the energy savings from the feed-in tariff. And they're producing the vast majority of this electricity. Homeowners, neighbors, farmers, small businesses, medium-sized businesses, large companies. The big four companies are producing, listen to this, only 7% of the new electricity of the 21st century. And they've readily recognized that they're not here. They won't be here for this. Because these giant vertically integrated companies of the 20th century can't scale millions of small players and lateral networks. So they're seeing what happened to the recording industry, newspapers and magazines, etc. So, does this mean the end of these four companies? No. It means changing the business model. Remember I said the companies that flourish will aggregate the networks? Millions of us are now producing this green electricity. Within 10, 20 years from now, hundreds of millions of people are going to be producing green electricity. Within 25 years, at least 1 billion in their own homes and neighborhoods at near zero marginal cost. The same trajectory we've had on the communication internet, 1990, 2014, 40% of the human race is democratized communication. Havoc on the big companies. In the next 24 years, the energy internet comes in. We produce and share on a digitalized energy internet across Germany, across Europe, maybe across Asia and the world. Everyone's going to be a player. It's already happening for millions of people, so we know it's real. What's the role of the power companies? They'll aggregate the networks. We send the energy to them, and that's technical running the grid. They'll have to run the digital energy network, but it's going to have to be open, transparent. They're going to have to be regulated so that they don't monopolize the grid. But they can certainly get returns by aggregating the network. And the way they'll make money is by selling as little electricity as they can. They'll do what IBM did. IBM realized there was no money in the computer, so they began to say, what we really do, our real expertise is managing information. The box, the computer, everybody can make it. There's no margin. Now everybody has a CIO, Chief Information Officer. The power companies are beginning to use the model we suggested. EDF has joined us in France, in northern France, on an industrial rollout. RWE and the companies here are doing it now as well. They're not leaving the second industrial revolution. It's going to be here for a while. But they also don't want to lose out on the third. So they're setting up partnerships with companies where they manage their energy the way Cisco and IBM manages information, but it's more than that. They're going to mine the big data coming across the three internets. And they're going to use that data with analytics and algorithms to help those companies increase their aggregate efficiencies, reduce their marginal costs, be more productive, and then the productivity gains are going to be shared back with the utility company. So there's actually more money to be made by selling less electricity. And that electricity is going to be renewable, no CO2. Let's take 3D printing, which is quite interesting. We have hundreds of thousands of hobbyists, thousands of startup companies, and they are downloading free software. Most all of it's free. Young people creating this for other young people, freely giving it to the commons. And then they're going up on the beginning of this Internet of Things, and they are with this free software, and they're taking recycled garbage from the neighborhood, recycled paper, recycled plastic, recycled metal objects, garbage. They're melting it down. They're using it for filament, and the software instructs the molten material to layer by layer build up a completely whole project with movable parts. It's just like magic. These 3D printers use 1/10 of the materials of traditional factories, because in factories you have subtractive manufacturing. You cut up a lot of stuff, throw stuff out, and make a product. The new manufacturing, you're building up layer by layer so there's no loss. And they're beginning to power their little fabrication labs with their own renewable energy at near zero marginal cost from their local cooperative. And they're just beginning to use electric vehicles to take the 3D printed to local markets. And within 10 years, those vehicles will be printed. The first printed commercial vehicle will be debuted this coming week in Chicago at the Global Science and Tech Fair. I was just in Italy yesterday. The Italians came up with a beautiful model. It's called the Strati. I think you've probably seen it. It's gorgeous. They know design. And then these cars soon pretty soon will be driverless on GPS logistics networks. Imagine this. In 1980, schools began to introduce one computer in a school. And then by 1995, 2000, every kid had a smartphone or a computer, so cheap. They're just beginning to introduce 3D printing into the schools. In the next 5 years, every school in Germany is going to have a 3D printer, and within 10 years, every kid's going to have a small 3D printer, and from the time they're 5 years old, they're going to be playing, no more Lego toys, they're going to be playing with their 3D printers, and an entire generation of hundreds of millions of young people are going to grow up with ease, believing it just makes common sense to be a prosumer, produce what you need, and share what you don't need or you're not using with others on a sharing economy and the collaborative commons at near zero marginal cost, just like we've done with music, videos, news blogs. The sharing economy is not only about sharing information, entertainment, news, knowledge, renewable energy, 3D printed products. This younger generation sharing everything else. Car sharing. Now, I know you've just outlawed Uber. Temporary. Well, let me explain what's going to happen after Uber and Lyft. A lot of money is going to be thrown away here. But when I grew up, to be propertied was the introduction to capitalism. I had to have that car at 16. I mean, that was my life goal, to be propertied, part of the capitalist market. I don't know any young people that own cars anymore. They couldn't care less. Why would they own a big hunky car that they're not using 90% of the time? They want access to mobility, not ownership of a vehicle. They're moving from ownership to access. You recall, Thomas, the book we put out, The Age of Access, in 2001, saying this was coming. It's now here. And what's interesting about car sharing services, Uber, Lyft, blah, blah, the website doesn't cost much to put up. The marginal cost in adding a driver to the website, near zero. If you have a car, you're not using it, you're paying the fixed cost. The marginal cost of starting to drive someone else is just your gasoline and your time. And it works on all three internets. You go up on the Internet of Things, and your smartphone connects you to the website. Then the website connects to the logistics internet, GPS guidance. They find out the driver closest to you within 3 minutes, you connect on the logistics internet. Then, when you get to your destination, you don't even pull out your wallet. PayPal pays it, you get it paid for you on the communication internet. In Paris, they're going one step further. Autolib, several thousand electric vehicles now. Anybody use them? Shared across the Paris suburbs, and some of them are powered from the energy grid with renewable energy at near zero marginal cost. Eventually 3D printed, driverless within 10 years, near zero labor cost, marginally. Let me tell you about Uber and Lyft. All the money going into Uber and Lyft reminds me when all the big telecom companies bought up all the spectrum. And then it turns out everyone figured out how to use Wi-Fi on the garbage spectrum and just went right around them, and their investment was really, really killed. Anybody can set up these websites. The technology's right there to do just what they did in Berlin. How long is it going to take for young people in Berlin to figure out why do they need to send profit to a global company like Uber, which then exacts more profit and tries to marginalize the workers? They get less out of it. There's going to be cooperatives forming all over Germany and all over the world. It's already starting. And young people are just going to set up their own website, for example, for Berlin or Hamburg or Frankfurt, bring all the drivers together, put in the GPS guidance, and create cooperatives. So instead of having profits to a third party, you'll pool your interest. The banks will give loans for this, and you will be able with cooperatives to have micro commons, pool your interest, share the revenue, nonprofit cooperatives. I'm always amazed when my colleagues say, how can you run an economy if you don't have a capitalist market? My colleagues believe there's only two ways to run an economy: capitalist market, government, or some combination social market economy. Have they never heard of the social economy? An institution which predates market capitalism by 1,000 years. In fact, the world hasn't heard of it because it was left out of modern history. It took an obscure economist at the University of Indiana, and she wrote a book, Eleanor Ohms, and she won the Nobel Prize. She looked at the whole history of the commons for 1,000 years, the only woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics. And she said, these were democratic institutions. We're the most social creature. We're not just looking for our own interest only. We realized through history as a social creature that our personal self-interest means that we have to also attend to the community interest, because together we create our lives. So we have these institutions that were democratic for 1,000 years all over the world. People pooled their shared resources. They pooled their creativity. There were sanctions and punishments for violations, and they still last. Go up into the Alps, and you will see all through the Alps, 3 countries, Italy, Austria, Germany, and they're still with these institutions. Over 2/3 of the agriculture up in the Alps are these commons, and no one ever reads about it in school. So what I'm suggesting here is we have 1.5 billion people in cooperatives alone. They get revenue, they share it with each other, it just doesn't go to a third party. Banking cooperatives, housing cooperatives, farm cooperatives, on and on. Electricity cooperatives now in Germany. What I'm suggesting here is fundamental, and I'm going to give you 2 last examples. Our young people are now sharing not only their cars, but now their homes. Airbnb is commercial. Couchsurfing, I love, it's nonprofit. They're sharing their clothes, their tools, their toys, all sorts of things in a circular economy. And the car is so crucial here. The car was the centerpiece of the 20th century, agreed? The whole economy grew around the car: steel, glass, cement, rubber, concrete, suburbs. And now they're being eliminated for car sharing for a younger generation you want access. For every car shared, 15 cars are eliminated from production. But the companies can't help themselves, because GM, Mercedes, they all want a part of the market. But in the long run, it means fewer cars. Now, Larry Burns, some of you business people know, was the executive vice president of GM, General Motors, until 3 years ago. He was the head of all future car development. Larry's just done a survey, it's in my book. He studied Ann Arbor, Michigan, where he's a professor at the University of Michigan, and he found at the incipient stage of the Internet of Things right now, you could have 80% fewer cars in Ann Arbor with the better mobility than you have now. Now, there's 1 billion vehicles on the road, cars, buses, and trucks in the world. This means we won't need 800 million of them in urban areas, dense urban areas. The other 200 million are going to be shared. They'll probably be 3D printed within 10 years. They'll probably be driverless within 15 years on the trend line. They're going to use renewable energy, near zero marginal cost, no CO2. If I'm wrong, show me how the trends aren't going that way. This is just common sense in the business community. Now, could this be derailed? Yes. Could there be catastrophic events that stop this? Yes. Could there be things we don't even anticipate that change the way we're doing this? For sure. But what we're beginning to see is the sharing economy and the collaborative commons is not an anomaly that fits nicely and neatly into a capitalist market. It is a partner. It cooperates. Sometimes it doesn't. And here's the final example to show you what I mean. Toys. Was it Ravensburg in Germany that created the first toys? Ravensburg. I once did a lecture there. I was shocked. The entire town turned out. That's the good thing about small towns. There's not a lot of things going on. But it was great. They showed me all the toys, and it's so famous. All right, toys. A little toddler at 2 years old gets their first introduction in the exchange economy, private property, and markets when mom and dad give the toddler a toy. And they say to their little toddler, "This is your toy, not your brother's toy and not your sister's toy. This is your toy. This is your possession. You take care of this toy." So the child learns about property, ownership, possession, and status. My toy. I might not use it, but no one else is going to use it. The kid uses the toy for 3 days, and it's never used again. We now have a generation of young parents in America that are going up on toy websites with thousands and thousands of toys that are being distributed family to family. So you go up, you buy your first toy. Your child uses it for 2 days, doesn't care. You send it back, you use the credit, and you look at the whole inventory of thousands of other toys, and you say, well, my kid's a month older, I like this toy. It's sanitized, sent back to you pretty soon in a logistics internet with 3D printed cars, renewable energy, etc. What this little toddler is learning is a sea change in thinking. He or she is learning that the toy is not a piece of property to possess. It's simply an experience to access for a short moment of time, then it goes to someone else. They're getting ready to share the cars. They're getting ready to share the homes. They're getting ready to share the renewable energy. They're getting ready to share the 3D printed products. The big changes often are so obvious that they bypass our intellectual centers. Watch the toys and how kids relate to the toys. The ultimate beneficiary of a zero marginal cost society is the biosphere of the earth. Let me be real clear with you as to why I wrote this book. It's the third book in a series. The Empathic Civilization, Third Industrial Revolution, Zero Marginal Cost Society. The real issue here is our species' survival. Real-time climate change is moving so much more aggressively than any of us anticipated. I first wrote about it in a book called Entropy in 1980, and I got to tell you, I completely missed the feedback loops, like my colleagues. We continue to underestimate the speed of this because we couldn't anticipate the feedback loops in the models. We are terrified. Terrified. Here's what's terrifying about climate change, and please tell everyone you know. For every 1 degree, let me say this. This is the watery planet. Everything depends on water. We go to other planets, no water, not interested. Our ecosystems have developed over millions of years based on water regimes, water cycles. For every 1 degree that the Earth's temperature goes up from climate change, from industrial activity, the atmosphere absorbs 7% more precipitation from the ground. The heat sucks it up quickly, and you get concentrated precipitation in the atmosphere. That means more violent water events, more violent winter snows and longer, more dramatic spring flooding, not just in Europe, but all over the world, more prolonged summer droughts. We don't know if we can live in California now, if you've been reading the stories, year after year, decade after decade. More Category 3, 4, and 5 hurricanes, tsunamis, typhoons. And we're only in 2014. Our ecosystems can't catch up to the shift in the water cycle. When our scientists tell us we're in the 6th extinction event, in real time right now, we've had 5 extinction events, 450 million years of life. Every time there was a turning point in the chemistry of the planet and wipe out pretty quickly, and around 10 million years each time to recover new biodiversity. We're in the 6th extinction event. Our scientists say, this is not controversial, we could probably lose upwards of 70% of all forms of life by the end of this century. As my wife says, we're not grasping the enormity of this moment. 99.5% of all the species that have ever been on this little oasis called Earth have come and gone. 99.5%. We're the babies, we're the youngest, we've been here 175,000 years, anatomically modern humans, and we're just sitting here and not doing much. But in Germany, you decided to do something. In Denmark, they decided to do something. But now the responsibility is on Germany, because the whole world's looking to this country saying, can you pull off this transition? Can you make it to the next round of human history? Can you help us lay down an energy internet, get us to zero marginal cost renewable energy, lay down a logistics internet, put it together with a communication internet, and allow millions of German people to access that and begin to produce and share on a sharing economy as well as a capitalist market? It is a huge responsibility. And now China has just joined you by pure fortuitous, if that's a word. The last book we put out, Third Industrial Revolution, I didn't have a lot of hopes one way or the other for China. By sheer accident, first Wang Yang, the head of the largest industrial region, endorsed the book. He's now in the 10-person Central Committee and vice chairman of the economy. Then Premier Li, and this is actually what happened, I didn't find out till later. They put out his official biography. I'd never met him. He said he was a fan, read the Third Industrial Revolution. I think it was the German edition, because it was given to him by someone in Germany. I don't know if I ever told you that. I found out about 2 months ago. Someone in Germany gave him the book. He then became premier. He said he was a fan, read it, and instructed the government, under his leadership, Premier Li, to begin looking at how to move these central themes. I was there last September. I met with the vice premier. I met with the leadership. And 11 weeks later, Germany, 11 weeks later, the Chinese government, National Grid, announced an $82 billion 4-year initial commitment to lay out a distributed energy internet across China starting now. So everyone in China, every person can create their own solar and wind in their own neighborhoods and businesses, and they're going to connect it to the communication internet and the spawning logistics internet. So what we're seeing here is 2 great countries, Germany moving this in Europe, and now China in Asia. Here's my wish list. Eurasia is one landmass. Wouldn't it be interesting if Germany and China, and they're each other's biggest trading powers, Europe and China, came together and help lead the human race into this new era by creating a super Internet of Things platform across Eurasia so that a third of the human race could move into the new era and then, with our help, assist everyone else to get there. Wouldn't that be a wonderful legacy for Germany and China? Let me say in closing, this is a big struggle. I'm not naive about this. If you read the book, I'm not optimistic or pessimistic. The book's much more complex than what I laid out tonight. Much more detailed, and all the challenges are there. And we know, because we're on the line in neighborhoods and countries trying to do this, this is really tough. And we are not unmindful of all the vested interests, especially the big fossil fuel energy companies, some of the power companies, telecom. They don't want this to happen unless it happens their way. So my hope is that here in Germany, we're all three political parties on the same page, Christian Democrats, the Socialists, and the Greens, and the business community is ready to move ahead. Logistics, transport, electronics, construction, all your major industries ready to go. Make this happen. Show the world that Germany can turn the page for us and provide a lighthouse, a flagship, and join, hopefully, with other countries like China that are moving this forward, and give the next generation hope that we can create new prosperity in a sustainable way, and at the same time democratize economic life. Hopefully, heal the planet. Good night.
So, may I put your jacket? And you have your tea?
Margaret here?
Yes, she's there. Now, many things to do right now. First, I would like to say, thank you, Jeremy, thank you very much for your lecture, and thank you very much for your book. It is readable, it's very well readable. I read it, I liked it, I would really full-heartedly recommend it to you. And so now we can use our time to go into some details. Now, I would like to start with my notes, the notes that I take for the preparation. So I used this paper, and this is a short essay of John Maynard Keynes. And this is what Jeremy had featured in his book. I guess it was chapter 1. So John Maynard Keynes, it's very readable. It's very short. It was written in 1930. The first talks were in 1928. And it is entitled Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. So that is, it's a long time ago. Now, what he said is, we are being afflicted with a new disease, namely technological unemployment. So he was really thinking about what is going to happen if productivity rises and rises and rises, and we don't need all the people there. We only need consumers. We don't need workers. And this is in the midst of the Great Depression. So that is really fascinating. It is just 6 pages, I guess. And and thank you, Jeremy, thank you very much for this piece of literature. Now we are in Berlin, we are in Germany, and so we know and we feel it, and we did this since decades to say we have to develop the post-carbon society. There is a lot of ecological discussion and dialogue, and Germany is really the country that wants the post-carbon society. So that's good news. But how can we manage the transition without a shock? So in case what you say is correct, and I think it's correct, so what will happen? What is and we have to talk about, what's the future of work, of taxation, of government? Okay, we can do that. We can start with one technical concept that is sort of at the heart of this Internet of Things, and that guarantees the free flow of information. And this is network neutrality, or net neutrality. it doesn't, you can call it this way or the other. Now, I talk to so many people. Believe me or not, maybe 10% heard about network neutrality. And sort of, here in this room, everybody understands it, I know. But many, many people do not understand network neutrality, and you see it in the eyes. They are bored when you try to explain it. So what can we do to sustain network neutrality in the public discussion so that nobody steals it away? And the telcos are about to do it, the big social networks, many, there's big business, and they really want to steal network neutrality. So what is your best anecdote so that we can use that everybody understands what's at stake here?
It's appropriate to start with that. When Berners-Lee put the World Wide Web online, free, he wasn't part of any capitalist market or anything else, he wanted the system to be dumb. In other words, so no one could control the pipes, and that means all of us could then be smart and use our creativity and talent at the ends of the system to connect up with each other. So net neutrality means that no one's left behind. If you have a service provider, you pay your monthly fee, and it means you have the same access as big companies, small companies. You can pay a little bit more for a little bit speedier service, but you're not denied access. You're not put at the end of the line, and your information is put along with everyone else on the net, so there's no discrimination. Now the telecom and cable companies are saying, well, you know, we own the pipes. We'd like to kind of change this. We'd like to have some price differentials here. And some of the power companies in the past, at least, have said, and there's still a few, which I will name if you like, not here in Germany, we're saying, you know, we want to be able to control the energy internet. We like the smart grid. We want it centralized, so it only goes to headquarters, so we can use the information for ourselves. Now we also have to worry, I think we have to worry about them in terms of neutrality. We have to worry about Google, Facebook, and Twitter for another reason. I love Google. It's the magic box. We all like Facebook, Twitter, and Alibaba, etc. The irony here is here are capitalist enterprises that have been wildly successful. Remember I talked about the ultimate paradox of capitalism? Google, Facebook, and Twitter, for very little cost, were able to create these vast collaborative commons so the rest of us, millions and hundreds of millions and billions of us, could produce and share our own information, entertainment, news, and blogs, devastating traditional information industries. But Google became rich, $50 billion of revenue a year. But all the other industries fell. The way they make money, of course, is by using our creativity and content and data, personal data, to sell to third parties, advertising, etc. The problem with this is that Google's now starting to look like a global social monopoly. And I went to Google and laid this out. I went to Microsoft, so I'd give them the courtesy, and I think the Google lecture is up. You can get it online. And I said, we love you guys, but here's the deal. If the knowledge of the world has to come through one portal, Google, which is 65% of the research market in the US and almost 90% here in Germany and Europe. Yes. And if Facebook, 1 out of every 4 people on the planet, I think, is on Facebook, and we have to rely on them as the portal to communicate with each other as an extended fictional family. And if we have to rely on Twitter for our gossip every day and how it's used, they're starting to look like global monopolies. So we don't want to lose them because they've created these vast new commons so we can produce and share with each other other things. They're going to have to be treated as global utilities. We're going to need, as you and I discussed earlier, some kind of a global authority, not yet here, that can bring government, business community, and the not-for-profit third sector all together at the table and govern these as global social utilities so they're managed so we can have openness, transparency, because what we want from this distributed collaborative super internet of things is not the monopolization of everything. We want the democratization of everything. Now, lest you think, because my German friends always think the glass is half filled, we always think half empty, we always think half filled. But lest you be skeptical, the reason I'm guardedly hopeful here, the recording industry with all of its digital management couldn't stop millions of kids. Once the technology's there, the commons is set up, you use it. Otherwise you close it down, then no one benefits. TV and radio could not stop YouTube videos when millions of kids started doing it. Newspapers and magazines were powerless to stop the blogs free information. And book publishing has been powerless, really, to stop a lot of free information that's being put out. So I'm guardedly hopeful. But again, this is going to be a huge struggle. A huge struggle that's going to go over 2 generations for the next 40 years.
All right, so then we go, maybe everybody talks to anybody they meet, talk about network neutrality, because it is really a very, very important concept. Now we have network neutrality, we secure that, and you said all these kids that like to share the information, they like to share the videos, and this is all very nice. But if we look at the Internet of Things, and we work on the Internet of Things at DFKI since 10 years, and we worked on smart microgrids. So it will happen, and it will come. But you need some sort of high-definition information society. All these sensors generate information. It has to flow, it has to flow, it has to flow. All this information. It is running, it is running. And here comes 2013. And even the wildest dreams suddenly looked like fairy tales. The NSA just monitoring everything. And now, when I talk to people, they say they destroyed the internet. Now, I don't like to share anymore, because I like to share, but I don't like anybody to supervise, to monitor my behavior. And so it seems this NSA scandal is like cancer for the super 3D, the super Internet of Things, and for the collaborative commons.
Let me say that this is interesting. Last year, as you know, the U.S. Supreme Court, by 5-4, you can imagine who the justices were, they shut down the Federal Communication Commission's protocol on net neutrality and said, you outstripped your mandate. So the FCC had to go back and redo it. You know how many Americans responded in a few weeks? Over 1 million, the most they've ever seen to a government agency. At the EU level, we're having this debate. I'll be in Brussels on the 29th of this month for our Digital Action Day. Nellie Kroes is the outgoing vice president of the digital economy, and we're going to begin to lay out, we already are, digital rights agenda, data security agenda. EU is going to lead on this. Germany will be the powerful player here. Because we need transparency. And let me say something else. This is deja vu to me of the early factory systems. When the enclosures came in, people were thrown off the land. It was more profitable and actually more efficient to do it another way in some ways. They came into the cities and they were helpless with the new factory landlords. So each individual was pauperized. It was a Dickensian world. The kids are working all week long with almost no money to eat. It didn't take long for them to understand you can't go it alone. They organized trade unions all over the world so that their creative content, which was their physical labor, their mental labor, would be compensated. That happened. I think it would be naive to think the following. We're going to have the entire human race connected within the next 20 years. Do you believe that the entire human race is going to stay silent forever and let a few companies control the network, drop network neutrality, and privatize the whole thing for their own ends? That nobody will speak up, especially when you have instant communication that could bring the whole human race together in a matter of months. We are simply waiting for this trigger. And I can tell you, I think it's going to happen. We may see some kind of global cooperative emerge, where billions of people say, we're in one global cooperative, and we will sit at the table with the big companies and government, and it's our creativity, it's our data, it's our content, and we will have a say, along with those folks who put together the networks and the governments, and the three of us will negotiate this. To believe that the human race is going to be silent forever, billions of people, it just defies history. People do respond.
So hopefully they respond this time. Now we talked about sort of technical issues, and you said the music industry didn't see what was coming. The news industry and TV and photographers and all these industries did not see. And these are very important industries. But there is another industry maybe here at stake, and that is the banking industry.
Yeah.
It seems this means something for the banking industry. And as we learned during the Great Recession, 2008, if the banking industry is sick, we all have fever. So in the traditional banking model, which is under attack, things happened quite well until basically 1980, until Reagan and Thatcher came in. Okay, but now the point is the stock market is digital. We can all trade, and maybe we want to or don't, but we can all trade. But the stock market and the stock prices always work on growth stories. Now, if we have to be a post-carbon society, if we have to reduce consumption, then less goods are produced, then less factories earn a lot of money, then stock prices collapse. And if this is happening slowly, maybe that's okay. If it's happening fast, pension funds, private stock owners, what can they do?
Well, in the book, I talk about the 10% effect. And that is, if you want to know which industries are going to be disrupted, you don't have to be a PhD. If an industry has a small margin, and they're very small profit margins, they're very vulnerable here. So these big vertically integrated industries, like newspapers and magazines, had such small margins for profit that when just 10% of the young people began not to buy their newspapers and magazine, boom, they went down. We're seeing it now in retail. Retail has a very small margin, and the younger generation en masse very quickly is simply buying everything on the internet. They go into a store and they fit lift, not shoplift. They look at a pair of shoes, try it on, they scan the shoe with their smartphone, go up on the internet immediately on that shoe, find the cheapest deal, and Amazon sends it free to them. And so now the stores are saying, we're going to charge you to try on the shoes. Not going to work. So we're going to see retail go next. So what looks like these powerful vertically integrated industries across many sectors are very vulnerable. Look at car sharing, how that's going to reduce the amount of cars used. Now, here's what I think is happening. It's interesting you said this. In Chapter 1, I mentioned GDP. Mm-hmm. GDP is a raw measure we created in the 30s to measure output. It's kind of not a very good measuring because it measures everything. If you build more military equipment to kill people, it's GDP. If you clean up waste dumps, it's GDP. If you have more prisons like we do, it's GDP. So they don't discriminate between negative and positive. But the issue here, I took that Chapter 1 and did an opinion piece for Fiscal Times, not Financial Times, a couple of weeks ago. We're seeing a drop in GDP. It's slowing. Most of it has to do with the second industrial revolution going to life support. High energy, unemployed, aging population, whatever. But a small part of this, which is going to grow slowly, or maybe more quickly, you're onto something here I think is important. Much of the sharing economy is not counted on GDP. And that is, if you produce free software, which everybody shares, and you're sharing all your information, entertainment at near zero marginal cost, it means billions of people actually have a better quality of life. They're producing and sharing information, entertainment, news with each other, and almost none of it goes into the GDP. If you and I are producing our own renewable energy off-grid, it doesn't go back to the grid, and sharing it with our neighbors, it isn't counted in the GDP at near zero marginal cost. Or if you're creating and I'm creating 3D printed products and we're sharing with each other on the sharing economy in the commons, in cooperatives, very little of it's in the GDP. And here's the most interesting thing. If the things we do produce at near zero marginal cost are shared over and over and over again, our clothes, our toys, our cars, we need less material from the earth to have them, less cars, less tools, less toys, less clothes. We're in a circular economy that lowers the GDP, but all of this increases our quality of life and our individual and collective prosperity. So what we may begin to see, it's not here yet. This is just a tiny part of the reason GDP is slowing, tiny, minuscule. But as you suggest, we may begin to see that a larger and larger part of the slowing of GDP in the next 20 years will be because we're moving to a quality of life economy. Think of car sharing of cars when we don't need 80% of the vehicles. So this is really what I tried to outline in this book is a general theory to suggest this is much more than a simple short-term disruption. This is a really fundamental change in the way we think, and none of us in this room can do more than get a general outline of it at this point. But GDP is now being challenged. The UN, France, OECD countries have all created quality of life indicators instead of GDP, and they're acting on them. They're looking at other ways of measuring the good life, which would be commensurate with a sharing economy. Lowering infant mortality, better health, longer life expectancy, more volunteer and free time, cleaning up the environment, stewarding our resources. All of those quality of life indicators are really taken seriously now. So I think we've created a new index which will go hand in hand with the sharing economy and the capitalist market. Because again, this capitalist market's going to be here, but it's going to share it with the sharing economy.
Okay, so, just to mention, there are microphones around, and if anybody wants to add or put a question, just give a sign, and you're very much invited to do so. I knew it. Okay, there's
First brave soul.
there. Yes. What a pity. I just.
Yeah, thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure and honor to have you here. My name is Dieter Janicek. I'm the speaker of economic policies in the Green fraction of Deutsche Bundestag. So I'm just at the moment I'm writing a paper about economic policies and all the things I read your book, and I think all the things you say is inspiring me, and on the other side I try to put this into politics. So, and I wonder why we have to tell the people, okay, there's disruptive technologies coming on, and they're going to destroy your market models, and you're going to lose a lot of jobs. And on the other side, there is this big new world with big data, and maybe these problems of security on the other side, renewable energy matrix. So how to bring this together and make really something that people can say, okay, we go with this, we go with you, we think that's the right thing to do.
The big key is employment. How do we create a prosperous, sustainable economy, and instead of worrying about GDP, have everybody employed, making a living, and creating a more economically sustainable society? In the long run, we are moving to an automated world. Keynes got it right. Some of you remember I wrote a book in 1995 called The End of Work. It took about 14 years for the economists to say, got that one right. It wasn't clairvoyant. As you and I suggested, Keynes got it right, Norbert Wiener. We all saw this coming in the 60s with digital control. Factory floors being automated everywhere. We will have no factory labor in 20 years from now. We have automated factories now. White-collar and service industries that people trained up for, they're all moving to voice recognition, analytics, AI. Now the conceptual workers, we always said, be a knowledge worker. Now with analytics and AI, and you're right in the heart of it, we don't need all the doctors, the lawyers, and the accountants when we have algorithms with analytics. So what we're seeing is what Keynes forecast. We're seeing the automation eliminating almost all the categories in the long run. In the short run, there is a silver lining. For 40 years, we have 2 generations in the short run, one last surge of mass employment for the world, which will give us time for the transition I'll mention, and that's this. In Germany, in every country, we have to build out the super Internet of Things platform. This requires an entire shift in the infrastructure of the planet to create the smart world we're talking about. That means in Germany, we have to change the whole energy grid from fossil fuel and nuclear to green energy. Now, that creates millions of jobs because you have to retrofit every building in the country. Fraunhofer Institute's in my group, Ike Weber, they did a lot of the work. And then you have to install the technology. Now, when you got to 10% green electricity, only 10% of all your energy green, renewable, you had created 350,000, I believe, net jobs. And that equaled the same amount of jobs as the entire rest of the energy industry combined. That was only 10%. Imagine when we get to 50%. Secondly, Germany has to, of course, transform the entire electricity grid to an energy internet. You have to put in the storage technologies now. The sun isn't always shining when you need it. In May of this year, you had 75% of the electricity power in this country was green, and we had negative prices the whole day because we didn't have storage, so we could modulate it. So we're going to have to put in an electricity internet and change the whole electricity grid of the country. That's lots of jobs, lots of businesses, IT, electronics, skilled, semi-skilled professional. Then we've got to take the whole transport infrastructure of this country and move it from dumb to smart roads, internal combustions to electric and fuel cell vehicles, GPS guidance and automated analytics. That's going to take a whole 2 generations of semi-skilled, skilled professional to do this. When you put it together for every country, this whole Internet of Things platform should come in over the next 30 years. The communication part came in 25 years. The next 2, the energy internet, the logistics internet, to create the super internet, another 25 years for the juvenile infrastructure, another 15 for the mature. That's 2 generations to build infrastructure and move jobs. And my message to Germany, please encourage investment across Europe to move this infrastructure so you're not alone. As Europe prospers, Germany prospers, etc., and vice versa. Now, in the long run, this is a smart system. It creates its own feedback. It's run by analytics and algorithms. We're going to automate a lot of the market. We're going to need very small workforces, high-end conceptual workforces. And places like your institute are working on this. What we're seeing already is a migration of employment from the capitalist market exchange economy to the social economy, shareable economy. We forget that the nonprofit sector, the social economy, is a giant. It provides millions of organizations and huge amounts of employment and produces goods and services that aren't produced well or at all by market or government. Nonprofit hospitals and schools and daycare centers and arboretums and culture and sports. It's just through the roof. What we're seeing is that this sector is growing by 42% in revenue, the GDP by about 16%. And this is where the employment's migrating from market to social capital, because in the social economy, it's humans. You can have some machines for backup, but it's creating social capital. It's creating our community, our sense of our common journey. It's deep play, not deep work, but it's serious. So 10% of the employment in my country is already in this sector. Same with the UK and Canada. It's, I think, higher in Germany. In the Scandinavian countries, I think it's 14, 15%. How do they get paid? It's the last question. My colleagues say, oh, this sector, it's parasitic, the economists say. It relies on government contracts, grants, and philanthropy. It's not a starter. Wrong. Johns Hopkins does studies every 2 years, Johns Hopkins University, of all the 40 countries in the world on nonprofits, not all the countries. And what they have found is that over half the revenue of social economy, not-for-profit enterprises are fees for services rendered, like hospitals, schools, environmental projects, etc. About 32% is government grants, which means they're less parasitic than companies, which is about 35% in my country of government contracts. And about 15% is philanthropy. And that's the biggest service that Maggie Thatcher and Ronald Reagan did for all this. You mentioned deregulation. They never anticipated that. I've been in nonprofits for 40 years, and I'm also in the profit world. We always used to, in the 60s and 70s, hire people who could write grant proposals to get government money and foundation money. Then when Thatcher and Reagan deregulated the government and got out of the business of providing monies to communities or social services, we began to have to hire young people coming out of business schools who could create projects, profit enterprises, cooperatives and other enterprises that could allow us to have fees for services. And so it made us self-sufficient. It was forced us to be that way. So I think short to midterm, one last surge of wage labor, 40 years, but now begin to prepare our students for both laying down the infrastructure and beginning to create a completely new approach to education to prepare our young people to create social capital and get on with the better things in life. And that is creating our humanity, understanding our journey on this planet. Let the machines do the small work of producing goods and services.
Okay, so that's very nice. I really think we need the machines to clean up the mess. It's like WALL-E. We need the machines to clean up the mess that we did to have a good time. And afterwards, there will be transcendence, and we will probably be more happy, hopefully. Now, coming back to today and the sharing economy, and I know we only have maybe 5 more minutes, but coming back to today and the sharing economy, you mentioned Airbnb, you mentioned couchsurfing, you mentioned Uber and Uber is really in discussion in Germany. And so this is what you wrote in Huffington Post beginning of September. Germany, absolutely, Germany and other governments around the world will need to create the appropriate legal framework to allow the sharing economy to grow. So this is, that was the last paragraph. Okay, yes, we will, and we can, but if this company is sitting on the West Coast, and the service is here, and we cannot tax them, because the money flows to them, and then it sort of flows to somebody, and the government cannot generate the income to pay for the teachers, then we have to work on taxation. That's point one. Yeah. Second, it is the case that all these people driving taxis, they have to make ein Taxischein. So they really have to make they have to have this Personenbeförderungsschein. I don't know what that's in English, but they like a driver license, like a driver license. And in case all taxi drivers do not need any more to do all these courses, to know all these things, to have all these documents, and if it's fair, and the drivers for Uber and the drivers for Taxi at Berlin GmbH have the same regulation, then that is okay with me. Yeah. But the situation we are in is not okay.
And I say this, obviously, this is happening so quickly, it's very difficult for governance to catch up to all of these disruptive events as the sharing economy emerges. Certainly there has to be codes, regulations, and standards that carry equally for the professional car services and the car sharing services for sure. Certainly taxation, but again, what I would say here is that it's only a matter of a very short period of time when cooperatives are going to be forming in all these cities and drivers are going to put up their just as technologically advanced websites. It's easy to do. Anybody can do it that knows the software. They're going to set up cooperatives in Hamburg and Berlin, Frankfurt, and other cities. I'm hearing the discussion already. Drivers will come together. They're going to pool their resources. They'll set up cooperatives. They'll get loans from banks, and they will then share that revenue. And then there will be some form of licensing, and there may be some form of taxing it, of course. And governance has to do that. But I think, they're saying all politics is local. In the new world of the Internet of Things, all business becomes local, but we then share and connect and distribute across the world. So this is coming. But it shows you, as you say, the technology and the economic activity is moving quicker. Almost every day we're being salted. So again, one of the reasons I did this book is say, take a moment of time and step back. Instead of being terrified about each thing, there's a pattern here. There's an orientation. There's a system emerging here. We've got to look at this orientation, political leaders, business leaders, universities, all of us, and we got to figure out how this new orientation allows us to move forward on governments, new business models, new ways of understanding our culture, how we relate to the environment. This is really transformative. I guess I wish I weren't going on 70. I wish I were going on 30, because I think this is the worst of times. It really is. This is a huge crisis. Not just the economy, but the planet. But the opportunities here, I'm sure you'll agree, we're in the same age area, the opportunities here to rethink the human journey are enormous. And let me also say, I'm not saying the dark side of human nature isn't always there. This is no utopia. I understand that we sometimes pursue self-interest for the community. Sometimes they're just bad people out there. What I do think is the human race has shown itself time after time, even with all the dark things in between, to try to improve our empathic regard and broaden our empathic extension and live together in more expansive communities so that we can begin to understand our common humanity. There are barbaric moments where we backtrack. But here, I think there's a moment here that we can make a big leap to biosphere consciousness and begin to think of ourselves as part of the biosphere of this planet. And this Internet of Things platform that connects all economic activity and with us around the planet can help us bring the human race together as a family and begin to chart that journey. But I'm not naive about how difficult this is. If I were to think about it, I might not do it. It's extremely difficult, but we will do it.
All right, so now I look, can we go on, or is it over? I just need for orientation. There is a question that we should address over there, the gentleman, and your voice is better.
I'm all right.
Thank you. My name is Johannes Riedner here from Berlin. I'm into politics away.
Where are you?
Thank you for taking the effort. There is the basic law of economics. Sorry? Yeah. The basic law of economics, according to Joseph Schumpeter, they take the effort or they don't. So I'm also quite pessimistic about the ways to escape from your corporative vision for this planet, because more and more people grown rich in between, and they decided to concentrate now on land grabbing, especially in the metropoles like Paris, Manhattan, Tokyo, and now we are coming to Berlin. It's a big sellout, not just here, but especially here. And it means that a lot of people tendency going to be excluded from cooperation. In 45, this city was packed with 4 million people, which were fugitives. So you cannot imagine what was happening here. It was a damned cold winter in 46. So now we're facing a situation, we're sitting quite rich here on Paris, Pariser Platz, near to Liebermann. But I think that this escape into the ground rate, which is not producing anything, which is happening now, is very frightening.
It's frightening, and so what's the answer? To go back to the 20th century? To stay mired in fossil fuels, which are taking prices through the roof, pesticides, fertilizers, construction materials, pharmaceutical products, synthetic fiber, power, transporting light. All of this is made out of carbon. We can't afford it. A barrel of oil was $3 a barrel in 1973. And when it went up to $12 a barrel that year, we had the Boston Oil Party, and thousands of us came out and protested the oil prices, $12 a barrel. In July of 2007, it hit 147 a barrel, and the entire economy of the world shut down because everything depends on fossil fuels. So do we stay in the 20th century, old energies, old technologies, old business models, climate change affecting our planet? Or do we try to break open the door? And I've got to say, here in Germany, my hands off to the Greens, the Social Democrats, and the Christian Democrats for coming together on the same page. It was a mature decision in saying, let's move forward and create a new period for Germany, Europe, and everyone else. And I think Germany should stop for a moment, because you're always down on yourself. We can't do it, we can't do it. Then you go ahead and do it. Then you keep saying, we can't do it, we can't do it. Then you go ahead and do it. Take one moment to congratulate yourself. I know that there is a transition on energy, for example. But you know your wholesale prices are plummeting. Your retail prices are going up because the ratepayers have to pay for the feed-in tariffs. But even here, the moment you actually get an economy of scale, people are going to have near zero marginal cost energy. You already have it in the grid. And also, if you read the Financial Times today, when everyone says German businesses can't be competitive because we have shale gas in the U.S., two things. One, shale gas is a bubble. All of us know this. I have utilities in my network. We bought up all these companies bought up all the shale deposits in one moment of time. They milked the sweet spots. There's only a small sweet spot in each deposit. 18 months, it's gone. So now what's happened is we've had real cheap natural gas prices because all the milks, the sweet spots, are being mined in 5 years. Some of the companies are going bankrupt because they can't get a return. And so even our Department of Energy says by 2019, the prices go back up. So we bought ourselves 5 years of PR, and all the world wants to start fracking. Just look at the U.S. Department of Energy, the International Energy Agency. Read Andy Hall, the chief hedge fund in the world on oil trade. Everyone knows this inside the industry. So my fear is the U.S. will be a second-tier country in 30 years by staying in these old technologies and energies. Let's hope that maybe California and the West Coast can join with Europe and we can get this thing moving. It's worth saying to yourselves, we did something bold here. And we're not going to stop until we make this transition happen. And we're also, listen to me on this, going to ask our government in Germany to find ways that our rest of our European member states can begin investing in laying down this super Internet of Things infrastructure. They should do their reforms, they should get their austerity in line, but they should also start moving on getting this infrastructure in place so Europe can help lead the world into this era.
All right, so the US, thank you for your applause for Germany. Thank you very much.
My wife's family, her name is Grunwald. They're all from Germany, outside of Berlin.
All right, you say the US will be a second-tier country.
Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, you say the US maybe will be a second-tier country. This is what we were told in the 70s and the beginning of the 80s and in the 90s, and it seemed to be very true, and then boom, they invented, I don't know, the smartphones or Google or something. They're sort of they're sort of leading the digital revolution right now. And what I see is that the US and Canada, if they move, they are so fast. Yeah. They are so very fast that in the end Europe will have the better ideas and the better technologies and make brilliant inventions at CERN, and of course have an Englishman like Sir Tim Berners-Lee. But in the end, the US takes it all. I mean, that happened for the past 30 years, 40 years.
I have a different read on this. I do believe that if America in the past wants to move and gets the story right, we move very quick. We'll spend our last dollar of savings on some new vision in the past. That has really changed in the last 20 years. Our wages have been stagnant since the housing recession of 1988. We've been living first off our credit cards, then massive consumer debt, then the subprime mortgages, and we've grown the whole global economy by literally using up the whole savings of the second industrial revolution with the interstate highway and suburban build out of the 50s and 60s and 70s. That's the truth of our situation. Yes, Silicon Valley, but that's not America. If you cross America in the last few years, you'll be shocked. Roads that are crumbling, infrastructure that's falling apart, millions of middle-class working people who are no longer employed, drugs everywhere. It looks like a second, third world country. I'm talking about all over the country, not just in the poor inner city areas. And the fact is, we have had a greater divide. The rich are getting richer in the top 1/10 of 1%. The middle class is being hollowed out. So do not be deceived that because Silicon Valley is producing these products, that has something to do with the prosperity of our country. Now, where it went wrong is, you're right, we did create, the communication internet really moved. But what happened is then we're not moving the energy and logistics internet, especially the energy internet, because we're relying on the old energies. If you don't move the energy internet, you can't get to zero marginal cost energy, and the whole value chain relies on that in order to have extreme productivity to increase your aggregate energy efficiency. There's no way you can move forward just with smartphones.
Yes, but you have space in the US and you have sun.
Yeah, let's
and
go.
even no rain in the so okay, but I'm quite optimistic for the United States, really, and I've been there, and it's what you say about the infrastructure is exactly what was written in the Spiegel this week about the poor bridges in Germany, and that we don't invest enough money, and all the infrastructure is going to collapse in Germany, and so this.
Would you rather be on an American road or a German road? How many have been to American roads? You're shocked, aren't you? You're totally shocked.
It is true. It's but the bridges are not any good. But now, I guess we have to close. I have one last question, and this fits to the workerless factories and the future, and it's a big concept. The social commons. Maybe we need something that we call the guaranteed basic income. Is this the way to go? When will we have it?
I mentioned that in the end of work in the last chapter, but I didn't come up with it. Milton Friedman came up with that before. On that one, I've kind of changed my mind. I do think there should be a floor. Nobody should be left behind. I'm not sure it has to be a guaranteed income, but I do believe in a social market economy. We're responsible for each other's well-being. And there's a lot of people who would like to work or aren't working. For some reason, they the opportunities that pass them by, not because of their own responsibility. So I'm a believer that there needs to be some mechanism to ensure a floor so that everyone has a decent quality of life. Each of us live one time on this planet. Life is this strange thing. We all want to flourish. Every one of us. And that includes our fellow creatures, I should say, too. We need a floor for them so that their habitat and their journey can be preserved. And even if we're not here, I really mean that as strongly as our human race. They have a right to be here, too. We're not providing a floor for them in terms of the ecosystems of this planet. But having said that, I believe, and I've outlined this in the new book, I believe that there are huge opportunities to build out the infrastructure. 40 years, the minute you start this, you build jobs, you build new businesses, and every major industry except fossil fuels is going to be involved. Electricity companies, IT, electronics, transport, etc. I don't sit up nights thinking about the global fossil fuel energy companies. That doesn't bother me at all. They're not going to be here. We're moving too quickly for them to near zero marginal cost. So I think we need to move the infrastructure for this economy, and we need now to begin to see the possibilities in the social economy on the commons and the shift in education for employment, for fees, for services, in the more important things of life, which is exploring our common humanity, trying to transcend the moment and not just spend our whole life making widgets. Last thought, back to Keynes and what our grandchildren will think. I suspect if we get any of this right, and it could all go, belly up. If we get any of this right, I suspect our children in 2050 are going to look back on the 20th century with the same repulsion that we look back on slavery and serfdom. They're going to say, God, my grandparents were educated to spend their whole life in a cubicle or on a factory floor, and their whole mind was sitting there in a kind of a Charlie Chaplin-esque way, monitoring machines and being like a machine. And they had almost 2 weeks off a year. In Europe, they got a little more, 4 weeks off a year. And their whole life was dedicated to producing widgets, goods and services. Because at that time, hopefully, they'll grow up in a world where much of their basic goods and services are automated, near zero marginal cost. They're still going to be arguing. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be a lot of things, because this is not a utopia of this species. Thank God. It's our fragility that we try to nourish with our compassion. Hopefully they'll be growing up in a world where they can get on with using the mind in a much more expansive way to explore our common humanity, to explore the existentials of what it's like on this planet to live here, and create a beautiful human community that lives in harmony with the rest of the biosphere we live in and our fellow creatures. That will take us a couple centuries to get right. That's a pretty good mission to be on. Let the automation and the robotics take care of the small stuff.
All right, so thank you very much, Jeremy Rifkin.